beyond the thunder and lightning, past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Well, greetings, welcome back, and as always, thanks for joining. Well, the Trump administration says emergency funds can't be used to keep SNAP benefits going. The administration says it will not use emergency funds to send out federal food aid at the beginning of November, blaming Democrats for not working to reopen the government. Millions of Americans, it's estimated about 42 million, are expected to lose their benefits this week, leaving states scrambling to pitch in and pay the difference, even as some have already notified recipients not to expect their monthly food assistance. How can Trump allow the suffering of millions of Americans get in the way of a political point? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. Let's quickly look at a couple of today's headlines. Hurricane Melissa, now stronger than Hurricane Katrina, is closing in on Jamaica. Melissa's 175 mile per hour winds rival the most intense Atlantic storms on record. The Category 5 hurricane is threatening Jamaica with a storm surge of up to 13 feet. And remember, 175 mile an hour winds at ground level. When you get up to the Blue Mountains and that area, those 175 mile an hour winds could become over 200. And it's expected that about 2 feet of rain is going to be dumped on the island. So as that rain runs downhill and that storm surge comes in from the ocean, where's all that water to go? Catastrophic flooding is anticipated. Callers to Social Security wait for hours to get help. Hours-long wait times, endless looping music, useless robot messages. Millions of seniors and disabled people call Social Security's 1-800 number every month, and they are experiencing maddening delays. Folks, the demolition of the East Wing of the White House, I believe, is a perfect metaphor for what Trump and his army of mayhem is being allowed to do to this government and to this country. The administration said it was going to improve Social Security customer service. It has gotten worse. Dramatically increased wait times are being experienced. He said he would end the Ukraine military intervention in a day. It's ongoing. Lower prices and inflation rising. All he can do is disrupt the voting process and arrest people who look like they could be immigrants. How's that working for you? And finally, the IDF chief, Israeli Defense Forces, says the war is not yet over. Eyal Zamir said Israel must receive the remains of all deceased hostages and continue the campaign against Hamas. The head of the Israeli military said yesterday that Israel's military campaign in Gaza isn't over until all the bodies of deceased Israeli hostages are recovered, and suggested the, quote, campaign against Hamas, end quote, would continue after that. I thought there was a peace plan. Quote, the war is not over yet, end quote. We must complete our sacred mission of bringing the fallen hostages home and continue the campaign against Hamas. Folks, documents and testimonies obtained by Haaretz reveal the Hannibal operational order, which directs the use of force to prevent soldiers being taken into captivity, was employed at 3 army facilities infiltrated by Hamas, potentially endangering civilians as well. Author Eyal Weissman has described a 2024 Israeli policy stating that, quote, the kidnapping must be stopped by all means, even at the price of striking and harming our own forces, end quote. Folks, this is not a condition. It's an excuse. This is not some anti-Semitic tirade of mine. It's reported by 2 major papers in the Zionist colony of Israel, Haaretz and the Time of Israel. The leadership in Israel doesn't give a damn about the bodies of the remains of the captives. It's just an excuse to continue the genocidal campaign against Hamas. On today's episode, the issue before us is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, is an entitlement program that provides about 1 in 8 American residents an average of $187 a month in food aid. But the roughly $8 billion a month to fund SNAP benefits comes through annual congressional appropriations, which lapsed on the 1st of October. The government says the benefits will end on the 1st of November. In a supposed civil society, how can this be allowed to happen? My guest is an award-winning playwright, activist, and political commentator. The Catalog for Philanthropy honored him with the 2022 Changemaker Award. He's the co-founder of We Act Radio, recognized as DC's best social justice station in 2017. Kymone Freeman, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get to the topics for today, take a moment and talk a bit about We Act Radio. What is a storefront radio station?
Well, when Spike Lee came to our studio, I had the pleasure of telling him that I designed it after his film Do the Right Thing. I'm Sam Jackson, CEO Daddy Love Jones, whatever the cat Sam Jackson character was. But it was important to have a storefront studio. Also reminiscent from DC history, from the Petey Greens and WL, where people could walk by and can wave at you. It was a different type of connection. And also being, unfortunately, like all the other Martin Luther King avenues in this country is in very poor areas of the cities. So in order for us to be there, it was a beacon of inspiration for a lot of young kids to see that type of activity happening in those areas. And shout out to my big brother, Rock Newman, who helped put us on a map because he came in, pulled up, and launched the Rock Newman Show there. And the rest is history, as you say.
And, it's interesting that you mentioned Do the Right Thing, because that's exactly what came to mind the first time I came into the studio and saw the window, the storefront looking onto the street. That's exactly the image that came to my mind. Why were so many people telling you that this type of community engagement, this type of community radio station couldn't be done in Southeast Washington, D.C.?
It's because, sellers displacing natives is not new. And what we need to understand is that we need to gentrify our own hoods. Nipsey Hussle said that. And so I had the forethought 14 years ago when Congressman John Conyers had launched the what was his initiative, and Radio One put him in the crosshairs. It was the performance arts tax. So what they were saying is that when records are played, the artist that own the publisher that owns the rights to that music gets paid, but the artist oftentimes doesn't. And we know the history of the music industry. So oftentimes a lot of those well-established artists will get left out. So John Conyers tried to correct that. And with that legislation, Radio One took it as a personal attack that, oh my God, if we actually have to pay the artist, our business model will collapse. And I felt they were being disingenuous with that. And so we started a campaign because they was trying to say we need to save Black radio. I was like, well, we need to change Black radio if this is predicated on exploiting artists. And if you can't afford to pay them, then there's something wrong with your business model. And so we was embraced by Congressman John Conyers. We launched this a counter campaign, and then we was able to attract, because one action always creates another reaction. And that reaction was when AM signal was made available to us. And then later on, a low power FM signal was made available to us. And now 14 years later, we're still here in the brick and mortar studio, and the building is paid for.
You're running for Congress in Washington, D.C. What are the three fundamental pillars of your campaign?
Well, we're going to say housing, health, and public safety. But let me first by saying this: no one in D.C. should be paying federal income taxes without D.C. statehood. We have the same voter representation as Guam and Puerto Rico, and they pay no federal income taxes. And if we have seen this administration weaponize federal budgets, then our response should be weaponizing our federal budget, which is our federal income taxes. And we pay more than most citizens in this country in several states as well. So I think that's the first thing. And then secondly, that, HUD has a guideline that said no one should be paying more than 30% of their income in housing. Well, that's a guideline. It's a metric that's used for financing and mortgages and what have you. But it should be a law. No one should be paying more than 30% plus utilities for their housing. It should be a federal law. And that's something that we'll be pursuing as well. And then finally, we need to start to address the root causes of crime and violence. And here in Washington, D.C., we just seen billions of dollars go to billionaires to build a new stadium that's going to be breaking ground, and their first game is going to be played by 2030. Yet we do not have a deadline until 2037 to replace all the lead pipes in Washington, D.C. So we're going to have a new stadium 7 years before everyone has safe, clean drinking water, lead-free in the city. And to think about lead is not just a negative detriment to cognitive function. It's also a precursor for violent behavior in children.
Now to the issues at hand. The Trump administration says it'll not use emergency funds to send out federal aid at the beginning of November, blaming Democrats for not working to reopen the government. Let's first start with, what is SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as food stamps? What is it, and why is it so significant?
Well, first, let me back up, because this program, Connecting the Dots, we got to always remember Dr. Francis Cress Welsing taught us, until you understand the institution of white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you understand will only confuse you. And we need to work from that premise and trying to understand whatever happens in the United States of America, because, you have a $300 million expansion on the White House taking place in the midst of all this. So it's very eerily similar to, Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake. And it's going on right now. But yes, the SNAP benefits, this is our federal program. Let me just give you some background information, because a lot of your listeners may not be aware of all this and the history of how this got started. Because the founding director, racist J. Edgar Hoover, famously said that the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense free breakfast program was the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. He viewed the program as a threat, not because of violence, but because its success in providing needed services demonstrated the power of community-led action to take care of the people without government approval, which he saw as undermining government authority. And the reality is that the community-driven initiative fed thousands of children and highlighted issues of poverty and government failure. And this resulted in the FBI and local police raiding kitchens and literally destroying food supplies and intimidating volunteers. Now, the irony of the legacy is that the federal government was pressured to create its own national school breakfast program in 1975 that was based upon the Panthers model. And ever since then, we have seen subsidized food programs to make up the gap. And that's what SNAP is doing. That's what this program is all about. And as you mentioned earlier in the program, is that they actually have resources for gap funding while the government shutdown is taking place. So they don't have to do this. They are purposely weaponizing food. And we can talk about the history of food as a weapon if you want to have that conversation as well.
Well, go ahead, because that's relevant to where we are right now.
Well, the concept of food as a weapon has a long history, but in America, it was first popularized by Earl Butz. He was the Secretary of Agriculture under Nixon in the Ford administration. And his idea was that the U.S. could starve another nation into submission. And for the past 65 years, we've seen the government try that in Cuba with the Cuban blockade. We see Israel doing it now against the Palestinians. And now Trump and his Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, is doing it too by politicizing food. Even on the government websites, they are blaming Democrats for the government shutdown, omitting the fact that they have resources to pay for all of this. And on those same sites, blaming the government shutdown, but they are simultaneously refusing the billions of dollars that the Congress has made contingency funds available for this, is proof of that they are intentionally weaponizing this and also politicizing their position. Now, on top of this, Secretary Rollins has banned the purchase of junk food for SNAP benefits. I agree with that. But now she's trying to introduce intermediate fasting as a healthy diet alternative, because what else can a person buy with $6 a day? That's what SNAP benefits is basically providing right now. But now she has even gone on record saying that not only is 30% of all these food supplement benefits fraudulent, they're claiming that they're actually buying liquor with the EBT card, Dr. Leon. No one's buying liquor with EBT card, because if they could, I would. So what are we talking about? They are weaponizing food, and that's what we're seeing right here. And I think that we need to point out again what Martin Luther King said: the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today is my own government. And so we seeing them having $1 trillion military budget, the highest in the history of the country, and now they won't use the billions of dollars set aside for the food benefits. This is being used as a weapon.
A couple of points. One is, not only are they talking erroneously, basically flat out lying about people buying liquor with SNAP benefits, they're also saying and repeating this lie that the Democrats want to provide food to undocumented immigrants. That not only is a lie, that's illegal. And they're not providing any evidence to support the lie. Why? Because they don't have any. And as you mentioned, using food as a weapon, Gil Scott-Heron told us, if they can't break the Asian will, we'll bomb the dikes and starve the man. That's just another quick data point on the whole idea of using food as a weapon. It's important, I think, for people to understand the true dynamics of who's being affected here, because the highest income to qualify for SNAP, it varies by household and state, but generally, gross monthly income must be below 130% of the federal poverty level. It's important to understand, again, who's being affected here. To qualify, you have to be receiving below 130% of the federal poverty level. So you're talking about $1,600 a month. And try to feed a family, try to pay rent, try to provide any other type of subsistence for your family on $1,600 a month in this country. And these are the voiceless. These are the people that are being directly impacted by this political stunt of Donald Trump and Mike Johnson, the speaker.
Well, it's often been said, control the oil, you can control the nation, control the food, and you can control the people. And here we are. I volunteered at the Capital Food Bank at the Ark here in Washington, D.C. And the people who was getting food supplements at the Capital Food Bank, they was all driving cars. They pulled up in cars to get their food.
Okay, go ahead. That's the next thing I wanted to get to, because now the furloughed federal employees. Go ahead.
There we go. And the Anacostia Coordinating Council have a monthly meeting held at Martha's Table. And I love going to the meeting, but I also dread going to the meeting, because when you walk into Martha's Table and they have the farmers markets, they have healthy food options for people with these benefits. And the line continuously gets longer every time I come. First, it was out to the door, then it was into the parking lot. Now it's down the sidewalk. Okay. And this was all before the cutoff. All right. So we need to understand that we're living in precarious times. And that is why they continue to weaponize in this to try to get the people into submission.
I got to repeat, $1,600 a month to qualify. Nationwide, they're estimating about 42 million people are receiving these benefits. More than 62% of those are living in households with children. 37% include older adults, people with disabilities. And here's another point. 38% are people that are working. So the stereotype, thank you, Ronald Reagan, the stereotype of people receiving these benefits. You remember the welfare queen, the Cadillac driving welfare queen, which was a lie. Thank you, Ronald Reagan. It was a lie. They talk about, well, we want to implement, you have to work for your benefits. Almost 40% of the people receiving these benefits are working. They're the working poor. And so I'm going through these numbers because I think it's very, very important for people to understand the reality that's at play here, the suffering that's at play here. And this, to your point earlier, this is a calculated decision that is being made by the White House to starve American people, to promote a political agenda and make a political point. Kymone.
Absolutely. And to your point, we need to always point out that the majority of people who receive these benefits are not Black people. The majority, numerically, are white people.
Correct.
Okay. But Lyndon B. Johnson famously said that, that if you give a white man someone to look down on, he won't know you picking his pocket. That if you give him someone to look down on, he will empty his pockets for you. So they are willing to trash their own political base, the uneducated white people that put Trump in office, just so that they can punish the people of color. That's who they really, their true target is. And that's what we're dealing with.
That's a great point on two fronts. One is Trump saying infamously, "I love the uneducated." And there's a reason that he said that. He loves the uneducated because they're the easiest to persuade. And the other is he focused his attention on immigrants, because if you give a white man someone to look down on, he won't know you're picking his pocket. And that's exactly what Donald Trump and his minions of mayhem are doing. They are picking the pockets. Look at the soy farmers in the Midwest. Look at the beef farmers, the cattlemen in the Midwest. They're suffering. And these are a lot of the same people that voted for this guy.
There you have it. But I don't want us to have a spirit of, oh, woe is me. I want to talk about, like, coochie chocolate, self-determination, what we can do for ourselves. And one of the highlights is that I saw that Pastor Jamal Bryant has pledged to swap his congregation's money for food donations and SNAP cuts amid the SNAP cuts and these job losses. And I like to see other mega churches rise to the occasion and do that, like the Joel Osteens and all the prosperity preachers. They can do this. Where are all the celebrities that these people love? Where are all those billionaires that claim to be of such benefit to the world, but they got billions of dollars to go out of space? And I haven't got my George Soros check. I don't know about you, Dr. Leon, but we need to recognize this, because this is where we're heading. And we said about Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake. We know what happens soon after that. All right. So, I think that the Frederick Douglass said it best, is that the measurement of a tyrant, the endurance, the measurement of a power of a tyrant is measured by the endurance of the people. So I believe, I submit to you, that's the quintessential definition of the amount of stuff you can take is the amount of stuff you shall receive.
Exponentially. We were just talking about SNAP. I also want to throw in the WIC program, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, because that's also 6.7 million women, infants, and children are in the WIC program. They're also being affected here. You mentioned the folks driving. Let's talk about the broader impact of these federal job losses. Somewhere between this estimated 750,000 to 900,000 federal employees have been furloughed. And this week was the first week that folks missed a full paycheck. So I only expect that in the next week, the next 2 weeks, we're going to see an exponential increase in the amount of frustration that people are demonstrating, because the realities of those gainfully employed who are living paycheck to paycheck is going to grow exponentially.
Yeah, it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better, because, like I said, those lines that I saw at Martha's Table were down the sidewalk before this. Okay. And I volunteered at the Capital Food Bank before this. And they said that the majority of the people that they service, not only do they have cars, they have jobs. So, we're looking at a situation where it's not going to be a good outcome unless we do something different. And the system and this administration, this fascist regime, knows this, and we need to call it out. And until, as we said, rise to the occasion, because a lot of people are familiar with Martin Luther King's last speech, but they're not as familiar with his next to last speech. It was delivered right here in Washington, D.C., March 31st, 1968. The title of the speech was "Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution." He goes on to say in that speech that far too often people find themselves living in periods of great social change, yet they fail to develop the new ideas and the new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution. I submit to you that's the quintessential definition of stay woke, and that is why they have turned that into a pejorative. But indeed, as Big Brother Dick Gregory told us, we definitely need to stay woke on these times and rise to the occasion. This is not going to go away.
So talk about some of the ideas, some of the things that people need to start taking into consideration, because I've been saying for a very long time that you find periods, you find epochs of change, and rarely do you realize during that time that you're actually in the moment. And what we know right now is we are in a moment of substantive change. We are not going back to what it used to be. We're moving forward into a new era, and that we need to understand what we can do to impact the outcome. What are some of the things that you're suggesting as you're on the campaign trail? What are the things that you are suggesting, other than vote for Kymone Freeman? What are some of the things that you're suggesting to people, that the practical things that they can do to bring about substantive change in this circumstance?
Well, first, let me start by pointing out how far we've come. I'm old enough to remember when they said, "Oh, we'll never be a black president." Well, when we finally got a black president, he wasn't all that we need him to be, but his symbolism was important enough at that time. But what did they accuse Barack Obama of, including this current president? They accused him of being an immigrant. They accused him of being a Muslim. They accused him of being a socialist, and he was none of those things, unfortunately. But now we see the rise of Zoran Mandani, who's about to become the first Muslim mayor of New York, and he is a Muslim. He is an immigrant, and he is a democratic
socialist.
You know, and on top of all of that, he's an anti-Zionist who's about to win an election in the most Zionist city in America. Okay, that has how far the political pendulum has swung, and we need to recognize that. I'll use those as two bookmarks. All right, and then and to take that further, we should stop doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. And what is that? We keep putting black faces in high places, thinking they're going to do something for us. Half of the CBC is bought and paid for by AIPAC, over half. Okay. Let's recognize that. The Charlie Kirk resolution honoring the life and work of Charlie Kirk passed unanimously in the Senate. You know, even the highest leadership in the CBC voted to support that. So these are disingenuous people who are working against our benefit, and they plan in our faces, and we need to recognize that. And then finally, let's look at the reality of money and politics. They are not working for the people. We are not living in a society where the people determine public policy. The majority of people will want the health care for everyone in this country, but we don't get it. The majority in this people in this country want affordable housing, but we don't get it. And the majority of people will demand that the billions of dollars set aside to keep these food benefit programs afloat will want to see that happen, but we're not getting it, because they're not responsive to the will of the people. And these are the things that we need to call out. And this is a breaking point, and it's high time for us to do something different.
As we look at Mom Donnie in New York, look at how long it took Hakeem Jeffries to finally endorse the brother. About 2 weeks before the election, Hakeem Jeffries finally comes around to endorsing him. And I mentioned Hakeem because Hakeem is in New York. What signals does that send to you about the broader dynamic within the Democrat Party? Because he was the Democrat candidate, the nominee. He won the New York primary for mayor running as a Democrat, and the Democrats wouldn't support him. Not because he's a communist, not because he's a terrorist, because he's Muslim, because he's a democratic socialist, and he's anti-Zionist. All three seem to make sense to me. And the party has done everything in its power to undermine this man's campaign. In spite of that, it is expected he will win in a landslide, beating Cuomo. So what does that say to you about the dynamics of the party and how unresponsive they are to the demands of the people?
You know, what can you say about Hakeem Jeffries? He unfortunately is the fruit that fell far from the tree of Dr. Leonard Jeffries and rolled down the hill and got hit by oncoming Zionist traffic. He supported Charlie Kirk before he supported his own Democratic nominee for mayor in his own backyard. And like you said, 2 weeks before the primary, just so for the general election, just so he can say he did do it, because he didn't have permission from his handlers to do it. And why do we keep harping on Israel, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, brothers and sisters, friends and enemies? Is because in Israel, they have subsidized housing. In Israel, they have free health care. In Israel, they don't have student loan debts. They have subsidized education. And all of that is subsidized by the U.S. workers' taxpayer money. And he did not get permission from his AIPAC handlers to endorse Mandani, and he had to hold out until the last minute in order to satisfy them. And that is unfortunately the reality of what we're dealing with and it's the pervasive mode of thought that's running through the Congressional Black Caucus, and it's the pervasive mode of thought that's running through most of our misleadership across this country.
So what does that mean for the people in Southeast DC? What does that mean for the people in Northeast DC? We know, and we could talk about in Chicago on the South Side. We can talk about Los Angeles in South Central. I mean, we can pick a spot. We can talk about Harlem in New York. What does this mean? What light should come on in the working class and the poor people of color in this country as they still find themselves caught in this binary political dynamic of Republican and Democrat?
I think that, as again, Martin Luther King, we're on the radical side of Martin Luther King Avenue. We need to have a radical revolution of values. And that means that we need to stop putting our money and our resources and our belief into people who are not serving us. And we need to acknowledge that no one's coming to save us. So this is a time for us to galvanize our community. We have resources in our community. We need to reallocate those resources. We need to hold people that's in our communities accountable for not doing what could be done for the benefit of the people that is supposed to be serving. And that's across the board. We need to acknowledge that. And until we do something different, we're not going to get a different outcome. And I tell people all the time, if we've seen them weaponize federal budgets to force the capitulation, then we should be weaponizing our resources going to the government to address our concerns and our needs. Nothing's going to change until the buck stops with us. And we have the power. I think it was Alice Walker, a famous Pulitzer Prize winner author of Color Purple. She said the greatest power is convincing people they don't have any. We have the power, but we have to do for ourselves. We got to think for ourselves. We have to have our own agenda, and we can no longer look to someone to come save us just because they look like us and they smiling in our faces, because too often they're doing just that, playing in our faces. So shout out again to Pastor Jamal Bryant, who is leading one of the great examples of having a radical revolution of values, where he's putting up his own resources for his own constituents. We need to see more of that across the board, and we need to demand that it happens across the board, because this is the moment. And if we do not rise to the occasion here, and the people that's in positions of power who do not do anything but give us more fake promises, then we need to make sure that we hold them accountable and do something different when that time comes. And I think that time is now.
And to your point, you know, a lot of folks are quite familiar with the phrase, the revolution will not be televised, even though they may not know that that was Gil Scott-Heron that made that point. The other thing that he spoke about in that context was what the revolution actually is. And what he said was the revolution is what happens when you change your mind. The revolution is what happens when you change the way you look at things. It's not what you see in the street. He said what you see in the street is a physical manifestation of a mind change. So to your point, the revolution is when you change the way you look at the world. Let me switch a little bit to, I mentioned South Central Los Angeles, I mentioned Chicago. Let's talk a little bit about federal forces on the streets of a number of our cities, in Washington, D.C., down the street from your radio station. You have National Guard troops patrolling the streets. Your thoughts on what signal does that send to the neighborhood, and what should the reaction of the neighborhood be?
Well, first, let me say that whether it's South Central Los Angeles, whether it's South Side Chicago, whether it's Harlem, New York, or Southeast Washington, D.C., the primary population of Black people have unfortunately been living in food deserts. Mm-hmm. And so we've had weaponizing of food, history, as I alluded to earlier, burden placed upon us. And in terms of your point to the federal takeover of these cities, they are all Black cities. They are all not just Democratic cities. And again, that goes back to institutional white supremacy, because we're marching down the authoritarian regime, the 10 steps to authoritarianism, as Stacey Abrams so eloquently pointed out. And I urge your listeners to check that out if you haven't done so already. But what are we going to do when Trump has already hinted at his third term? He's not going anywhere. He's strategically putting these military presence in places where there would be resistance. And when he doesn't leave office, he's going like, what are you going to do about it? That's what this is about. And this is what we're heading for, because this is about the browning of America. And this is about white people trying to maintain their power, the white nationalist power. And they do not want to see the rise of Zoran Mandanis across the country. Okay, that's what this is about. We need to understand what it is. It's not just about simply Trump overstepping his power. It's not simply, and it's definitely not about crime. You know, they building, you know, Alcatraz, alligator Alcatraz. Yeah, they might be doing it for Hector now, but they will get to Tyrone next. You know, like they said, you know, the first they came for, you know, the trade unions, and then they came from the Jews. Then it will get around to you. So don't think you're different. Don't think you're immune. Oh, I'm not a criminal. This had nothing to do with me. Oh, I'm not an immigrant. This had nothing to do with me. Yes, it does. Because when the lights go out, we all Black, and you need to realize that. And we've seen U.S. citizens getting picked up with this, these ICE thugs that is running around here. And unfortunately, here in Washington D.C., our leadership has completely capitulated. You know, in fact, Laura Ingraham on Fox News is on record for saying that Muriel Bowser is the best mayor DC ever had. Trump has even applauded her and as a benchmark of what mayors should be doing. Whereas we see mayors in Chicago and Baltimore doing just the opposite. And in fact, they are actually collaborating on how they're going to rise to the occasions, addressing root causes of crime and violence, and they're also identifying eliminating poverty as a precursor for decreasing crime and violence, because poverty itself is violence. Here in DC, 30% of our children live in poverty, okay, where the average white family has 81 times the wealth of the average Black family. Let me repeat. The average white family in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, has 81 multiples of the wealth of the average Black family in the same city, all right? And we have not done anything to address that. And until we have that radical revolutionary values, nothing's going to change that. And no one's coming to save us. These are things that we're going to have to do for ourselves. So prepare to participate.
In fact, as we look to wrap this up, you quoting those wealth statistics or lack of wealth statistics, folks really also need to understand that it is clearly understood in the literature, even though it doesn't get discussed in the politics, that the primary cause of violence is poverty. So when they talk about solving the crime problem in Washington, D.C., the answer, or South Central, or the South Side, or Harlem, or pick a place in St. Louis, the answer is not more police. The answer is programs that will enable people to improve their life circumstance. If you're at work, you don't have time to be wreaking mayhem and craziness in your neighborhood if you're on your way to work. It's when you're sitting at home with nothing to do. The idle mind is the devil's workshop. So they aren't even really discussing, particularly when you've listened to Mayor Bowser talk about the federalization of National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. They're not talking about solving crime. They're talking about dealing with it.
Exactly. Well, we need to point out to your listeners is that in Washington, D.C., we have more police per person than any city in America. Anywhere in America outside the Diamond District in New York, D.C. has more police per capita than anywhere else in America. And America has more prisoners than any other nation in the entire world. And let's put that in perspective. China has 1 billion people, 3 times amount population, but yet America, with 5% of the world's population, has 25% of the world's prisoners. This is not the land of the free.
Nor is it the home of the brave. Kymone Freeman, FreemanForCongress.com, folks. That's what you need to check out, FreemanForCongress.com. And if you're in the area, you need to tune in to We Act Radio. Where can people tune in to We Act Radio?
You can follow us on our TuneIn app and also at weactradio.com. I'm so happy to report that our studio is being renovated. Our first floor will now be home to the largest collection of banned books. It's called the Artivism Library. If anyone likes to support the Artivism Library and the collection of this massive collection of banned books, you can go to socialartandculture.info. Socialartandculture.info. Do something.
Brother Kymone Freeman, thank you, man. Really appreciate it. Look forward to having you back.
Peace. Stay strong.
Same to you, man. Folks, I got to thank Kymone Freeman for joining me today. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Don't know who my guest's going to be yet. We're still working on that. But trust me, in the words of the Moon Man, it's going to be a big one. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed, wonderful remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.